Are you an avid gamer? Or maybe you just play casually? What about if you've never touched a controller before? Well, don't fret. All are welcome here at the Double XP podcast hosted by the Triforce Projekt.
Hello and welcome back to the Double XP podcast, the talk show here that we discuss all things gaming related and probably more. I'm your host, the Triforce Projekt, and we have a doozy of a one for you today, whenever you're listening. We're doing something a little bit different compared to a couple other episodes. So this one is gonna be kind of fun, I think. But without dragging along too much, let's just get right into it. We are going over the history of microtransactions and how they came to be in the world of gaming, vaguely. We're not going to dive too deep into it. I don't want to overload anybody or get too crazy with it, but we'll kind of get into it. So, basically, what we're going to cover is how they started, what they've evolved into, how kind of where they're at today, and how most people have most gamers, at least I should say, have shown their disapproval of microtransactions mainly. So, with that description kind of being said, sit back, grab yourself a drink and some snacks, and listen in to get your double XP for the day. So, microtransactions. Most of you that hear that, especially you gamers, that'll hear the term will think back to, at least for me, it's the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot box fiasco, which that was a headache in and of itself. That was a real big issue that a lot of gamers had problems with EA doing. But basically, what the loot box was is it allowed players to pay real life money to unlock large enhancements or better upgrades or major playable characters that under normal playing circumstances would take dozens, if not hundreds of hours possibly to unlock playing the game. So it was basically a version of the game that you could just spend money and have the best stuff right away at the beginning. With that being said, that made a lot of people very upset just for that fact. By the fact of if you had enough money, you could just unlock everything, or like I said, the best characters, weapons, etc., things like that, on day one. You know, you could buy the game and then go in and spend more money and do this, like unlock all the characters and just be ready to go. Done with it. Before you even set foot into an actual game, into an actual match. And for Star Wars Battlefront 2, this was a big deal because that was a multiplayer only game. I believe now it has some sort of like single player, but it was when it first came out, it was multiplayer only. But that made those people who had the money to do that massively better, massively more improved than anyone else on the playing field, especially at day one. But we'll get more into that a little later on, because we gotta go to really understand what microtransactions are and where they came from. We have to go back to the beginning of when they came out, and that, for anyone who asks, is definitely not the Star Wars Battlefront 2 loot box. That happened almost, if not over, a decade prior to the release of Battlefront 2. So, let's get to the beginning. Now, take yourself back. Go all the way back to 2006, long time ago. The first microtransaction that was sold on the market by a major publisher was made by Bethesda when they offered a cosmetic item in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Now, what they offered was, I believe it was 3 different types of horse armor. There was a gold, a silver, and I think there was one other color, but I'm not sure actually. But I believe it was $2.50 per set, which is a big expense. And basically, they created these things to test out the market to see how the consumer market would react or respond to the concept of DLC or downloadable content that you had to pay for. And with that being said, most people didn't think it was a good idea or didn't like the idea of spending extra money to just get cosmetic things in a game that they had already spent money on, which kind of makes sense. I don't know. You can take it however you want, but I could understand that back in the day on why people wouldn't want to spend more money on a game when they already spent however much on the game as it is to buy it just to play it. But even with that being said, I think I read somewhere it was over like 54 or 53% of people disapproved of this concept. So a little over half, about half the people didn't like it. To me, that's not like a significant, like it's kind of standard. I feel, kind of have people that like it, have people that don't. That's not a big deal. But even with what people said about it, the horse armor on Oblivion is the 9th best-selling DLC Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion has offered, and was still being purchased 2 years after its initial release, which is incredible. That's a crazy concept to me. Something that people did not enjoy and did not like pretty much out the get-go and thought was kind of unnecessary ended up being in the top 10 for the best-selling DLCs for Oblivion. And honestly, I don't know how many DLCs are for Oblivion. Let me do a little research on that, actually. But yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, well, all right. With what I have found in my research about the DLCs for Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, is there's only 10. So that's not really that big of a deal, but it wasn't the worst selling one, at least. That's interesting to me, that something that people didn't really think was that great still was not their worst selling thing. With that being said, they still obviously did their trial run of everything, and it was at this point that Bethesda and a lot of other game studios began to use the microtransactions DLC, small little item DLCs like that, that concept a lot more frequently. And basically, it was just a secondary source of revenue. It was another way to make a little bit of money on a game that you had already released and someone had already owned. Because there's always going to be those diehard fanatics that'll spend more money in a game that they love to get those extra little things because they look cool in game and they love the game. So that totally makes sense. I understand the concept of that. And to me, cosmetic things are okay, but we'll get a little bit more into that towards the end. You'll get my kind of opinion on things probably. So the company started doing this a lot more frequently. They started making stuff a lot more prevalent from between 2006 and 2008. A lot more minor DLCs, cosmetic things, microtransactions started coming up on Xbox like the Xbox Live Store or PlayStation as well. But then in 2008, microtransactions made a jump into the mobile phone world with the introduction of the iOS store on Apple iPhones. And this is where microtransactions kind of exploded and took off and slowly made their way into what we know what they are now. Well, not slowly, pretty quickly, honestly. Um, but the mobile games on pretty much all iOS store or all iOS store mobile games, excuse me, solely relied on microtransactions for their main source of income, basically. So they were pretty much all free to play, and they were all just hoping that you were gonna pay to get the unlocks and things like that. And they actually made the game play where you almost a lot of the times you almost needed to spend money to complete levels and do things. I feel like almost everybody knows what Candy Crush is. That game took the world by storm on mobile, on PC. I remember playing it on like Facebook. I think it was on Facebook at least, and then like playing it on mobile. Just it was crazy. So many people, everybody was playing it. Your grandma was playing it. Your little sister, your brother, your mom, your dad. Like everybody played Candy Crush. It was weird, but they made it to a point where like you needed to spend money on these microtransactions to really get anywhere. So in the first 3 years of the launch of iOS apps, so from 2008 to 2011 roughly, it made over $3.6 billion in revenue and with 15 million downloads. And 80% of that revenue came from mobile games, which, like we just stated, the mobile games were using microtransactions to make their money. That is astronomically insane, in my opinion. That is just crazy that that would happen. Because if you think about it, at least in my opinion, when iOS apps like App Store was first introduced, it was on smartphones that, were expensive back in the day. I don't think a lot of kids had smartphones like when this was first coming out. I feel like this was adults doing these things. And that is also just so crazy to think about in the beginning of like how many people were buying games, how many adults were buying games. Like, I don't know, nowadays it's 2022. Like, nowadays 5-year-olds have smartphones or access to smartphones and like are playing games, watching YouTube, TikTok, whatever you could want to say. Like, they're on it all the time. But back in 2008, 2009, 2010, like, not everybody, especially kids of that age, had access to smartphones. I mean, hell, they didn't even have access to phones, really. Like, cell phones. I mean, okay, cell phones are a little bit easier, but like, to an extent, at least not many young kids that I knew. So things have changed a lot in that sense. But that is still just an astronomical amount of people I feel that were spent, adult men and women that were spending money on mobile games in microtransactions. But when the gaming industry saw this happening, or like noticed this trend, um, the PC and the console developers started finding more intuitive ways to introduce more and more microtransactions to their games to kind of capitalize on that same thing that the mobile users were noticing. So like really it more so started out as a small way to help bridge the gap to fund more parts to the games, I believe, and just another way for companies to get a cash flow. And then once the mobile, like the phone world, mobile universe got a hold of it, that completely changed what the whole microtransaction world was. Um, once people kind of let their greed get to them, I guess I'll say, and they could see how much money they could make from microtransactions, that's when we started getting lots of issues, I think. Lots of different things. Even so, like in the beginning it did start out with microtransactions were really just for cosmetic items, it seemed like, mainly, at least in the gaming world. Um, and a lot of people really didn't think it was worthwhile, or that's how the game should be. A lot of people were like, you already charged me for the game, so I shouldn't have to pay extra money to get things. Which, like, I understand, but then also, like, you didn't have these things beforehand, and that somebody spent time, like the company spent time to create them, so it's fair to spend, I think, money to receive those items as well. That being said, how do we think that they took off and kind of ballooned into what they are now? You say microtransactions around gamers nowadays, and it's almost a collective groan of people upset and irritated, because microtransactions have plagued almost everything, especially if you have a free especially if you have a free to play game that completely will change anything and everything about the game. Take a game like Overwatch 2 that recently just came out, was released free to play, um, but it does have microtransactions, and that's kind of what they survive on, obviously, as a free to play game. They turn to, well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves at the moment. There's some other things we can talk about as well. But they use what's called a battle pass, or I'm not actually sure if they call theirs a battle pass. It's a season pass, I believe. Um, Other games call it battle passes. I think that's what Call of Duty calls theirs, which is not a free to play game, mind you. So you have to pay for that game, and they have a battle pass which allows you to unlock extra cosmetic items for weapons, characters, charms, or just different little trinkets, essentially, that you can unlock for playing the game. But you have to spend money to get that. It's usually around $10 for a battle pass, and a battle pass will last for a season, which is anywhere roughly, most games do about 60 to 90 days for a season. 90 is a very high number. I don't think I've actually seen one that long. It's usually like 60 days. Some go a little longer than that, some are a little less. And then they will take like a couple of days off and then start another one. So they get, I don't know, 3 to 4 a year roughly. And that's, $10 a pop. Each one is $10. They also give you, like, some games will give you incentives of, as you complete, like, the challenges or the levels in the battle pass, you can get the currency that you use to buy the battle pass. And, like, I know, like, Call of Duty, if you complete the battle pass, which in Call of Duty it's 100 levels to complete. I don't know all the logistics of, like, the amount of XP or, like, time you have to play to actually unlock that. Um, but they give you enough. You get enough of what they call COD points, but you spend real money on their points to, or like these COD points, to then buy the battle pass or like other cosmetics. Um, but if you complete the battle pass, they give you enough points to buy a battle pass, so you can get your battle pass for free. Or at least they used to do that. I don't know. It might be different now. Excuse me. So, I'll have to kind of look into that. But I know in the past they used to allow you, if you could complete your battle pass. So if you could complete through those 100 levels in 50 days, 60 days, or whatever, um, you would have enough points to buy the next battle pass that came out, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of a neat thing. I don't know if all games do that, because it's kind of a big deal. You could only, if you are someone who plays Call of Duty solely and only plays Call of Duty, you could buy the battle pass once and then probably have yourself covered to never have to buy it again if you play enough. So That's kind of a cool feature or a cool thing that they kept in. But companies have now basically figured out ways, and gaming companies in particular have figured out different ways, like the Battle Pass, to implement microtransactions more readily available in their games for a more viable source of income, which to them then in turn allows them to spend more money on doing more things. I mean, you look at Call of Duty, they have a whole store that has 30 different gun skins and things that you can buy and spend anywhere from $10 to $20. There's even some cheaper ones on things. It's ridiculous what is there. And like the amount of money they make on that alone is ridiculous because that keeps certain things going for them. It's just incredible how this has evolved. And there's a few different ways that people or that companies have implemented microtransactions into games. The first thing we'll kind of touch on is the loot boxes, the aforementioned loot boxes. And basically, what a loot box is a set of purchasable, randomized in-game items that can vary in rarity. It's kind of some mumbo jumbo jargon there, but basically what it is that it's a random assortment of these items that they have in game that all have their own probability of being in this box that you're going to purchase and receive and open, essentially virtually open. Now there have been some laws passed, not recently, but like when loot boxes first kind of became a thing, for a lot of places you have to state your odds or your percentage chance of getting whatever items are in the box. They used to not do that. You can also get into the whole debate of they could just be putting a number up, you could never get the chance. But we're not going to go into that. We're going to take everything at face value and assume that people are following the law and doing the legal thing and making sure that you have a chance to get the items that they say you can. Because obviously for boxes, like the rarer the item, the less likely you are to get it. It's just kind of common sense. Think about like baseball cards or football cards where you get like the Tom Brady rookie card or those different specialties and type things where they kind of are, there's not like a one, well, kind of like a 1 in a million type thing. It's very special, it's worth a little more. But basically, they're usually small additions to the game that are meant to be bought more than once. So you buy these loot boxes in hopes to get a certain item or to get particular items for a set, depending on what you're playing. Some games will run loot boxes that do like power upgrades or in-game benefits, and some games offer loot boxes that have cosmetic items, like only cosmetic items. Some games offer things that have all of what I've just mentioned all together. Just kind of is just about every multiplayer game that's out on the market now has some sort of loot box that you can purchase for cosmetics or an XP boost or similar things like that. EA, Activision, Psyonix are just a few examples of companies with loot boxes. Overwatch, which is Blizzard, I just mentioned them recently or like earlier. They're also a company that has actually not loot boxes. I don't think they have loot boxes, so that's a little different. And there's just there's many other companies. And those are not the only ones that have that. The issue with this style of transaction is that it is very similar to gambling, and it can breed gambling tendencies and addictions, you could say. Some loot boxes, like I was talking about earlier, tell you the odds of getting a rare, common, or legendary item, which can lead some to some bad outcomes for someone with an addictive personality. You could be looking there, you have that 1% chance to get that rare item or that legendary item. And, someone could be like, oh, well, that means if I buy 100 of them, I'm going to get it. And obviously that is a over exaggeration, just kind of a general basis idea of this concept. There's many other things that could happen as well. It could even be a issue for a child who has access to a parent's credit card on their gaming console somehow, where then you are running up large bills on a credit card, debit card, which honestly, if that's the issue you're having, we have some other things to talk about, but that's not going to happen in this episode. But yeah, like that, that's plenty of, I'm sure if you're any sort of gamer that has been paying attention to any sort of gaming news over the past 2 decades, well, decade and a half, well, yeah, probably almost 2 decades now. You have heard an article or read an article about how a child spent $500 on Fortnite V-Bucks or anything of the sort on a parent's credit card, and that was not supposed to happen. So that can happen with loot boxes like this. Kids don't quite understand things that well like that. Not all kids. Or that could just teach a kid about gambling at an early age even. That's a possibility that could happen. But the worst thing about all of this with loot boxes is the fact that it's not technically considered gambling. So there's little to no regulations on what happens with a loot box, or like with anything to do with loot boxes. For all we know, the loot boxes could just be making up the percentages on the items. It's kind of we're taking it on your word at face value for what do we have going on here. The next type of microtransaction in video games would be in-game currencies, which I talked about a little bit with Call of Duty. But that is basically you spend real life money to get a currency in game to use to redeem, or you use that currency to then redeem cosmetics or whatever you have in their like store. The main use for these is, I think, a little different. It was a little different way to make people, I think, feel like they were not spending real money in game to get certain items. Because you can go buy 1,600 or 1,000 coins for X amount of dollars, and it takes those coins. You take 800 of those coins to buy outfit for your character, or 1,200 of those coins to buy skin for a weapon, or different things like that. A big incentive that they used to do, or not used to, that they still do with these in-game currencies, is they incentivize you to buy more. So if you buy, let's say 1,000 coins is $10, but they'll say, hey, if you spend $15, we'll give you 1,700 coins. So really it comes out to be like 100 coins is $1, but you're getting $2 extra if you spend the $15 opposed to the $10. So like if you spend $15, you're getting $17 worth of coins, but if you were only spending $10, you got the $10 worth of coins. Now they do this to some pretty crazy extremes. A lot of games now have setups for like $3, or no, it's usually like $5, $10, $20, $50 and then $100 to spend on coins, and they vary on how much extra coins you're going to get, but with each step higher in price, the more bonus coins you get essentially. So they're trying to incentivize you. You spend $100, you're going to get almost $20 extra in coins, let's say, or just things like that. It's kind of a crazy concept, because you're just spending real money to get coins to spend those coins in game. I don't get the idea of like making people feel like it's not a like you're not spending money. It's just kind of weird. Another type of microtransaction is in-game items. So this is kind of like those XP modifiers or boosts or things like that. But it basically allows in-game purchases to take advantage of the game. Like in World of Warcraft, you can spend money in-game to buy pets or mounts, which pets will help you. I think they fight with you. I've actually never played World of Warcraft. But I think you can have them like help you in battle and things, and then mounts help you get around the world or like the universe easier in game, so you can get play from place to place a lot faster. This is just still pretty widely used, but not as much anymore. Like I was saying, this is more so like a lot of like XP boosts or things like that, where you can buy something that'll give you 50% extra XP for the next hour. Call of Duty kind of gives these things away for free a lot of the times, but it'll say like, oh yeah, here's a double XP for the next 60 minutes, but that is 60 real time minutes. So the second you activate it, that timer starts counting. It's not 60 in-game minutes. It's not 60 like match minutes for Call of Duty. The second you activate it, you're going. So that's kind of where they get you with that. It's not like it lasts as long as most people think it should. So that makes it just a little bit more frustrating and annoying. But the final microtransaction is kind of plays into what we were talking about just now with the XP boosts or modifiers, but it's expiration. So, kind of very well, basically the same exact thing, or basically what we were just talking about. It's very similar to like arcade games that had time limits, where you had to put in more quarters to keep playing. But basically, it is used to encourage you to purchase it to continue playing or to continue with your boost. Kind of pretty self explanatory. Like I said, we just covered it really with the XP boosts. But yeah, that's really kind of the basis and the history of microtransactions. In a very simplified way. I'm not I don't have a full knowledge of everything to do with the gaming world, and things like that. And we didn't dive into like the psychological tricks. I mean, we talked a little bit about it with like the in-game currency, how they kind of rope you in with the extra money or like the extra coin you get for spending more money. And then a little bit, I guess, with like the random chance loot boxes. There's a few other things of like, also, again, I didn't even go into this at all. But like with these microtransactions, like Candy Crush, when they're telling you to buy extra items or extra gold, whatever, to spend on things like that, they say they're offering discounts on things, but it's really just telling you to buy the most expensive one. It's really not a discount. It's just like showing that's a cheaper price than the rest of them. So you're like, oh, that makes sense. That looks cheap. But yeah, so there's like the whole psychological part of it too, of like the game kind of not tricking you, but essentially tricking you into spending money to continue to play, or you hit a level that is just so difficult that you can't do it, you can't beat it anymore, so you need to spend money. So there's little ways that companies can kind of turn the microtransactions into almost a necessity, it feels like, to play the game. And no gamer likes that. Nobody likes to enjoy a game, and nobody really enjoys a game to do it to if you have to spend that type of money all the time, or just any type of money like that all the time. Like, that is not fun. That's not enjoyable, at least in my opinion. You can definitely let me know if it is something that you like to do, or if you are the type of person that likes to pay to win. That's by all means do it. If you enjoy that and that's how you like to play the game, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, to me, it's not necessary, and you can achieve that same exact thing by playing the game. And I think, uh, personally, to me, there's more satisfaction out of actually unlocking the characters in that sense, instead of spending money to just unlock everything to begin with. But like I said, if you like to do that, if you like to unlock everything and spend that extra money just to have everything at the beginning, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think about microtransactions? Do you think they shouldn't be in video games? Do you hate them? Do you kind of enjoy them? Are you somebody that gets the battle pass for all the multiplayer games you play, or one of the multiplayer games you play, or do you like getting those new cosmetics for characters? Just let me know. I'm gonna probably put up a question poll on this video as well, so let me know down there. Uh, but that is going to be kind of the ending here. Not kind of, that is the ending of the history of microtransactions. I appreciate you guys sticking around and listening to the podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. We will be back. If you have been following along, we've had a little bit of a hiatus from releasing, so this came out. It's been a while. I apologize. We're going to try and start releasing some more consistent podcasts. So stay tuned for that. You can find us on all your podcast places. And again, I hope you all enjoyed it, and we will see you all at the next one. I am the Triforce Projekt, signing off. We'll talk to you all later. Peace.